Welcome to my Coetail Course 5 final project. In this video, I will talk you through the steps I took to improve an editing lesson using the design thinking cycle. Each step of the way, I made pretty big changes to the lesson. Going through this process really helped me understand how important it is to pause and reflect on lessons that happen multiple times throughout the year. My first step was to empathize. I was noticing that as my students were working their way through the writing process, they always kind of skipped or skimmed over the editing part of the process. I wanted to create a lesson that my students could actively participate and be social while they're editing their peers' work. I came up with the idea of making a Google Sheet where Studio 4 and 5 students could add a link to their writing and ask for specific feedback about one of the 6+1 traits of writing. Then, as an editor, each student would choose a piece of writing they would like to give feedback on. When they opened the Google Doc, they would use the commenting feature to make suggestions. My next step was then to define my learning objectives and goals that I wanted my students to get out of this project. I used Julie Dirkson's Design for How People Learn to help me set some goals. In her book, she focuses on 4 types of goals or objectives: a focusing objective, a performance objective, an instructional design objective, and an instructional evaluation objective. These are not always relevant to every task, but they are important to think about. I thought about my lesson and wrote 4 objectives based on what I thought was important. I also wrote one final SMART learning goal, which encompassed all 4 of the objectives together. Already, the design of my lesson was starting to change. I made a few changes to the Google Sheets, which included adding my final SMART goal as a purpose for the students. Next, it was time to ideate. Time to get creative. In order to help me with this, I used the Triple E framework. This focuses on the engagement, enhancement, and extending of the learning that is happening in a lesson involving technology. The 4 tools I decided to analyze were Google Docs, Flipgrid, Beluga, and Photor. I also included a ranking for privacy and for social interaction. What I found was actually that Flipgrid was a much better tool than Google Docs. Most of this reason was because of the enhancement and social interaction of the tool. Beluga was also a good choice, but I had less flexibility on how I interacted with my students. It was only during my 3rd blog post writing for Coetail that I had a big light bulb moment. Using Flipgrid in a number of different ways could really assist my students in connecting with each other and talking about their writing, especially if they're editing online from home. The prototyping and testing came pretty close to each other after that, and I involved them in one blog post together. For the new prototype, I ended up creating a new slide deck hyperdoc. It included a learning map, learning objectives, and slides for the teacher to work through with their students, including QR codes, links to all the Flipgrid activities. On the Flipgrid, I made 8 topics. The first one was very important for background knowledge. Here, the students uploaded their posters or videos that they made about each of the 6+1 traits of writing. This way, anyone coming new to the Flipgrid could have a little bit of background knowledge. This is all part of step 1, the background knowledge.
Voice. I can make this sound like someone I know wrote it. I can write with style and faders. I can make my piece reach out and pull readers in. I can make my piece feel a certain way.
Next, the students uploaded a piece of writing to the Flipgrid that they wanted feedback on. They also used a writing checklist to pre-assess where they feel their writing is currently at. Their upload included a link to the Google Docs where their writing is located. This doc had shared access for comment-only suggestions.
My goal is to achieve sentence fluency because in my story there is parts that I have about things and sentence fluency.
Then it was their turn to offer feedback to somebody else. Students chose an area that they were confident in and gave tag feedback to other students. They had the option to do this by text or video comments. Once somebody had given them feedback, it was time to review their suggestions. Did they want to make those changes? Why or why not? Then students gave thanks. How will you thank the person who just edited your work and gave you suggestions? Then it was time to use the writing checklist again, just as they did before they uploaded their piece of writing to Flipgrid. All they need to do this time is look at one section, whichever section they got feedback on, and see if they made any progress. In general, most students had about one check mark extra than they had previously. This showed me that even though it was successful as a first attempt, it could be even more successful if students had other peers giving more feedback, possibly even on different traits of writing. As I've gone through this process, I can also reflect on the ISTE standards for educators. As a learner, I have improved my practice by exploring new approaches with technologies and reflecting on their effectiveness. As a leader, I have modeled the adoption of new resources and tools for learning by sharing this lesson idea with other teachers in grades 3, 4, and 5. As a citizen, I have created experiences for students to make positive, socially responsible contributions online, which help their peers improve their work. As a collaborator, I have co-learned with my students to troubleshoot issues and redesign downfalls of my prototype. As a designer, I have used technology to design a learner-driven activity while exploring and applying instructional design principles. As a facilitator, I have fostered a culture for students to choose their own goals and use creative expression to communicate their ideas. And finally, as an analyst, I have provided an opportunity for students to use their own data to help them achieve their learning goals. In general, I really enjoyed using the design thinking process on a lesson. Of course, we don't always have time to do this for every single lesson that we do. However, I did find it useful that I was using an editing lesson which comes up multiple times throughout the year. I do think it was valuable to use the EEE framework and to make iterations of this lesson design since it comes up so many times throughout the year.